Some survival tricks don't fade with time, they get sharper. And when you look at the fieldcraft that came out of World War II, you start to realize something wild. Soldiers with barely any gear, crushed by cold, rain and terrain, were building shelters that still beat half the so-called high-tech tarp setups sold today. These weren't fancy, they weren't pretty, but they were brutally effective. And that's the real magic pure ingenuity forged under pressure. So let's dive straight into the genius shelter hacks soldiers used during World War II. Moves that still put modern bushcraft to shame. No fluff, no filler, just straight legacy of survival knowledge. One of the first lessons soldiers learned across Europe and the Pacific was that the ground wasn't just where you sleep. It was your biggest heat thief. Moisture, cold and pressure from the earth could drain body warmth faster than wind. So, before even thinking of overhead cover, veterans built the most crucial layer, first insulation below. They used dry brush, pine needles, grass, even bundled clothing, if that was all they had. The secret was simple but, scientifically sound. Trap air. A thick bed of anything that held pockets of air would save more warmth overnight than wrapping in 3 blankets. Modern campers often underestimate this, just throwing a tarp on the ground like it's, magic protection. But tarps conduct cold. World War II soldiers knew better. Their shelters weren't just roofs, every setup began from the ground up. And that is one hack many modern tarp setups still get wrong. Here's where things get brilliant. Soldiers discovered that going slightly into the earth often worked better than building on it. They dug shallow trenches, then shaped the walls into a cradle. This turned the ground into a natural windbreak, cutting heat loss by up to 1/3. The overhead cover was usually nothing more than a poncho, a zeltbahn, or even scraps of canvas. But because the walls were already blocking wind, they didn't need strength, they just needed coverage. That tiny combination made a trench shelter warmer than many tents of the era, and even some minimalist camping shelters today. The trench also solved water runoff. Instead of pooling beneath you like a badly placed tarp shelter, water moved past the trench and around the body. Dry equals warm, and warm equals alive. The lean-to wasn't invented in World War II, but soldiers perfected it. The problem with modern tarp lean-tos is that people pitch them too high and too open. Soldiers learned quickly that a lean-to worked best when it felt almost too small. Tight, low, angled directly against prevailing wind. The magic came from combining the lean-to with a reflector wall behind the fire. Soldiers stacked logs, stones, or, anything solid to reflect heat straight back into the lean-to. Suddenly, a thin sheet of canvas wasn't just blocking wind. It was bouncing warmth around the shelter like a heat trap. With the right angle, one soldier could sleep through freezing temperatures with nothing but a poncho overhead and a fire in front. Many modern campers still attempt this setup and honestly fail because they forget the reflector wall. World War II troops never did. One of the smartest hacks came from making an A-frame using nothing but a poncho snapped together with another poncho. But the genius wasn't the shape, it was the tightness. Soldiers pulled the poncho so low that it almost brushed their faces when they lay down. The small air pocket underneath warmed fast from body heat. This design created something incredibly rare, a low-profile shelter that resisted wind, resisted rain, and warmed quickly. Even today, an A-frame pitched as low as the troops used it outperforms most open tarp systems, especially in storms. And because ponchos snapped to ponchos, it allowed 2 or 3 soldiers to link their shelters together, making a longer, stronger weather shield. A micro-barracks made from pure improvisation. When materials were scarce, soldiers didn't panic. They got creative. Forest soldiers, especially on the Eastern Front, used layered natural roofing, thick pine boughs, grass mats, bark sheets to make the world's best water barriers. A tarp was helpful, sure, but not required. The trick was in the overlapping pattern. Every layer was laid like roof shingles, always pointing downhill. Rain that hit the top layer just cascaded off harmlessly. These days, a lot of folks use a tarp and figure that's good enough, but honestly, if the angle's wrong or the pitch is sloppy, water pools or leaks, and that can really ruin your night. World War II troops built their shelters like miniature houses. And, believe it or not, even without a tarp at all, these setups stayed dry enough to sleep through heavy rain. Foxholes were meant for combat, but soldiers turned them into bunkers. They would dig deeper than necessary, carve shelves into the walls, line the bottom with brush, then use logs and earth to create a roof. Even a thin roof of branches topped with mud could block wind, rain, and snow. It's pretty impressive, really. The result? A shelter that blended into the terrain, protected against weather, insulated from noise, and shielded from fire. Modern tarps can't give you that combination. A foxhole bunker was the ultimate low-visibility survival shelter. It wasn't pretty, but it worked like nothing else. One of the most mind-blowing survival moves from World War II soldiers was something modern bushcrafters still don't do enough. The heat trap. Scene 2. Creating warmth. They dug a tiny pit inside the shelter, just a few inches deep. Then they placed hot stones inside it after heating them by fire. Those stones radiated warmth for hours. Combined with a low A-frame or trench cover, the heat trap could raise the internal temperature drastically. Modern tarps can cover you, but they can't heat you. This trick did both. Where modern campers often fight the wind, soldiers used it. They angled shelter openings just enough to let a small amount of wind feed the fire, while the rest of the structure stayed stable. By doing this, the flame burned hotter with less fuel. Modern tarp shelters flap, collapse and twist because they aren't placed with airflow in mind. Back then, soldiers placed shelters like engineers, not campers. It's one of the simplest but most overlooked hacks from the war. Shelter wasn't just about covering the body. It was about, controlling the environment. Because, honestly, modern gear often makes people lazy. Soldiers, really had to think about so many things. Direction, heat, airflow water runoff, shape, insulation angles, and of course resources. They treated every shelter like it was a whole system, not just a quick fix. And honestly, that meant even their simplest setups, just a poncho, a bit of brush, and some earth, ended up performing better than a lot of those $100 tarps just slapped between two trees. The truth is this: a tarp is only as smart as the person pitching it. World War II soldiers, well, they were forced to become smarter. And that's exactly why their methods still dominate today. If you want more powerful survival breakdowns like this, make sure you subscribe to Legacy of Survival, drop a like, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Knowledge keeps us alive, and this channel, well, it keeps that knowledge burning.